Hello everyone. It's time to talk today about the deep state. And deep state is a term that has been used more and more over the last year or 18 months. You'll even see it in the legacy Mockingbird media occasionally, although they will present it in a form that's inaccurate so that they can paint it as a conspiracy theory. They try to present it as something like the Cabal that you might remember from the old X-Files TV show, where it's this secretive group that meets in a smoky room and very centrally planned sort of group that works together to achieve, again, this centrally planned sort of agenda. And in reality, that's not what it is. It's not centrally planned or well organized per se. It's more a group of factions within power structures that exist within the global economy and the global political schema. And so you might think of bankers or people in the oil industry or certain international business people who are in charge of large international companies or companies that get involved in very political type situations, maybe like Halliburton or General Dynamics or something like this maybe. So the best analogy that I have, the way that I see it, the real anatomy of the deep state is to imagine the Olympic rings and all the interlocking rings. Each one of those rings sort of represents one of the factions or sectors of power within the global structure. For instance, one of the rings might sort of represent the banking and finance people, or the small group of people who are working together, who are collaborating to maintain their hegemony or achieve more power and control, or just sort of increase their wealth potential in general. The industrial military complex might be seen as another one of those rings. The oil industry. So it's really this loose-knit collection of people who do work together to maintain their plans and to benefit themselves. And in a lot of areas, there's certainly overlap. It's really easy to imagine in the case of, say, the military-industrial complex and some of the energy sectors like petroleum and oil. Those kind of go hand in hand. If you want to wage a war with your new toys, you've got to fuel them and mobilize them and things like that. So there is a certain degree of overlap, but it's more or less by necessity. And even the cooperation among the people in these groups is more cooperation by necessity rather than this idea of central planning trying to achieve a coordinated goal. And so what's really happening is there's always this constant sort of underhanded backroom shadow dealing that's going on at any time with any of these smaller groups of people as they essentially seek to benefit themselves and maybe their close collaborators. So the idea of a deep state isn't really this tinfoil conspiracy hat stuff so much as really just human nature in terms of how people sort of wheel and deal and backstab. And I'm not a a big TV watcher, but I have friends who I spend time with, and they like that show Big Brother, and occasionally I've watched a few episodes, and I kind of liken it to that. You've got like 20 people or something in a house, and it sort of bifurcates into Team A and Team B, and within Team A and within Team B, there are these little smaller cliques that form, and ultimately you get down to just a small handful, maybe 2 or 3 people, who are really pulling the strings behind the scenes of everything that's going on. But again, it isn't really this centrally planned, well-coordinated effort. It just comes down to a few people who have sort of mechanized their abilities within that social structure. And so that's all probably another good analogy for people who are familiar with that show. It isn't really, again, this centrally planned, well-coordinated system, but more or less the result of human nature and social interaction and sort of everyone's drive to benefit themselves, I guess. So when the mainstream legacy Mockingbird media comes out and, pretends like the deep state doesn't exist because, well, there's clearly no, cabal that's working in the shadows, they're actually right. But the concept of the deep state, the fact that there is shadow dealing and there is this deep state at work, is still a fact. And it's still part of our politics, especially here in America. And it seems like maybe at this time it's much too big of a part of our politics. And I think a lot of people over the last decade have been increasingly becoming aware of that, and it's time to really do something about that. And so I've put some thought into this, and there are other people sort of putting out the same idea here, and that is we need to mobilize against incumbents. In terms of our politicians, we need to clean house, sweep the incumbents out, and bring in new people. Primary all of them, bring in new representatives, get a new set of people to represent us, because these old guard politicians, the ones that are career politicians, think Maxine Waters, who's been a politician for 40 years, or someone like that, John McCain, and all of these kinds of people. They're so embroiled and sort of cemented in the culture that the only possible outcome is this sort of deep state mechanization. Again, because it's always the same players, just maybe shifting around a little bit, but it becomes this very sort of embroiled and sort of, what's the word? It's a very cemented sort of structure, sort of group of people that are always there, and so it's very static. And the dynamic nature of politics and of representing people has been greatly diminished because we have all of these incumbents. And so to the American people, whether you're left or right, whatever your ideology is, doesn't really matter. Everyone needs to mobilize against the incumbents and bring in new blood. Young faces, probably, not just because I'm a young person, but just because they're going to probably be more receptive to sort of the populist leanings of everyone else, of the smaller person. And I don't say that in this sort of right-wing term. I know populism has kind of taken on this right-wing leaning sort of feel to it, but more or less just, someone who's going to represent the common people and the working man and the working class and that kind of stuff is going to be a younger person who has little experience becoming so caught up in this political structure and this very sort of regimented group of old guard incumbent politicians. So the call to action is to mobilize against these career politicians, get them out of office, primary them the hell out of there, and get some new faces in, and even somebody without experience who maybe doesn't know the ropes as well is going to be better than these people who have been sort of programmed into corruption because that's the system that they've been working in for so long. And at some point you kind of have to, like when in Rome, go with the flow sort of thing. For these people who have been in this for so long, they're really left without a whole lot of other choices. If they want to keep their job and all their great money and all the fringe benefits and everything, they're just going to have to play ball with one another. And so that becomes the name of the game, is sort of playing ball with each other rather than representing the people as they were elected to do. So stand against the incumbents, primary them out, get new faces in, and continue to do that. That should be the name of the game. The fresh face of politics in America is to get rid of this idea that incumbents are somehow career politicians benefit us, because they don't. There's no need for these people to be serving these roles for long periods of time over and over again. It's very clear to people on the left and the right that this is detrimental to the average person in the United States. Thanks for listening.